Vienna, 1907, as the snow fell soft and slow over Schönbrunn Palace's gilded gates and the empire held its breath between peace and war. Prince Iskander of Tirana arrived in a dark navy overcoat, his collar stiff with frost, his breath trailing like smoke behind his smile. He stepped down from his carriage with a diplomat's grace, the polished boots of his royal guard crunching behind him. His arrival had been quietly arranged, no fanfare, no ceremony. Only a private audience with Emperor Franz Joseph and a dinner that could change everything. Iskander was 25, the only son of King Halim of Tirana, a small but strategically vital Balkan kingdom caught between the ambitions of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the rising threat of the Ottomans. His father had sent him not only as a diplomat, but as an offering a marriage alliance was expected. Talks of Archduchess Maria Theresa's hand hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. But Iskander had no interest in the Archduchess. He was here for something else. Or rather, someone. The night he first saw her, the grand ballroom of the Hofburg glittered with gaslight and music. A Strauss waltz carried through the air, and the court's finest spun in silk and velvet, their laughter soft and practiced. She stood against a marble column, her gown deep green, the color of alpine moss after rain. Her gloves were too simple for a noblewoman. Her hair was pinned with only 2 brass combs. Her posture was not trained elegance, it was soldier's stillness. "Who is she?" Iskander asked his aide in low Albanian. "Bernetta," came the reply. "Daughter of General Graham, commander of the Imperial Army's Southern Division." "A general's daughter," he murmured. "Not nobility." "No," his aide warned. "And not available." Iskander crossed the ballroom before his thoughts could stop him. He bowed. She looked surprised, but not flustered. "Your Highness," she said smoothly, accent clipped but not deferential. "I'm told you've come to Vienna seeking peace." "Peace is a good cover for many things," he said. "I came for truth." She tilted her head. "And what truth are you hoping to find in a room full of liars?" He laughed, not loudly, just enough to draw 2 glances. He took her gloved hand and led her into the waltz. Bernetta had never danced with a prince. She had trained in cavalry tactics and loaded rifles since she was 12. Her mother had died birthing her, and her father, a man of steel and schedules, had raised her more like a lieutenant than a daughter. Yet in Iskander's arms, she moved easily, drawn into the rhythm of the room, the spin of chandeliers above. When the dance ended, he didn't release her hand right away. "General Graham would have my head if he saw us," she said. "Then I'll wear your favor over my heart so I'm worth mourning. You're charming, but reckless. You're brave, but lonely." She blinked, then stepped back. "I have duties." "So do I," he said. "But we can still choose what to carry." He didn't see her for 3 days. On the 4th, a note arrived in his breakfast tray, tucked beneath the silver teapot. The writing was sharp, practical. South Gardens. After inspection. 30 minutes. He went. She waited by the frozen fountain, her coat military gray, her breath rising in fast clouds. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Then why did you write me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed him a small book. A map of the southern fortresses. "You asked about truth. Tirana's border is being fortified from both sides. My father suspects Austria will strike first." He closed the book. "Why tell me?" "Because I don't want war," she said. "And because you looked at me like I was more than a general's daughter." "You are." Their hands brushed as he gave the book back. She didn't pull away. Later that night, he sent her a folded scrap of parchment inside a hollowed-out apple. It read only, "Meet me at the riding stables." Midnight. She came. The stables were empty, only the horses shifting in their stalls, steam rising from their flanks. "I grew up riding," she whispered, running a hand along the flank of a bay mare. "Before I could read." "I grew up reading before I ever touched a sword," he said. She turned. Why me? Because you don't lie. Because you see the world as it is, not as you're told to. He stepped closer. She didn't move. You're leaving soon, she said. Yes. Tomorrow. So this ends here. No, he said. It begins. I can't follow you. My father would disown me. I'll come back, he promised. With permission. With papers. With a new path. She looked away. Words aren't enough. He reached into his coat and pulled out a silver signet ring, the crest of Tirana etched deep. This is the only thing I have that proves who I am, he said. If I don't come back, it's yours. If I do, you'll return it. She didn't take it. Instead, she stepped forward and kissed him, quick and fierce, like a decision made in silence. Then she turned and left. He rode for Tirana at dawn. Months passed. Letters came coded, brief, smuggled through merchant routes and diplomatic pouches. One read only, still waiting. Still yours. B. Then a letter arrived that shattered everything. King Halim was dying. The court demanded Iskander marry to solidify the throne. They had chosen a bride, Princess Vesa of Montenegro. He refused. The council threatened to strip him of his birthright. He left the palace that night, taking only his sword and a letter of abdication. His last words to his father were, "I will not trade love for power." He crossed the border in disguise, riding through snow and smoke, carrying nothing but his heart and the memory of a girl in a green gown. He arrived in Vienna under a false name. A stable hand at Schönbrunn recognized him. "Prince?" "Not anymore," he said. He found Bernetta in the barracks yard, sword in hand, drilling with a cavalry unit. She turned, stunned. He dropped to one knee and held out the ring. "I gave up my crown," he said. "But I kept my promise." She stared at him, her breath caught. "I don't care what they say. I don't care what we're meant to be. I choose you." She took the ring. And for the first time, her voice broke. "Then I choose you, too." The snow had melted into soft mud along the Danube's edge by the time Iskander and Bernetta found a rhythm to their new life. He rented a modest flat on the western edge of the Josstadt district, just above a bookbinder's shop that smelled perpetually of glue and old paper. The rooms were narrow and drafty, but they were theirs. The ring she wore now hung from a chain beneath her uniform collar, hidden from the eyes of her father, her superiors, and the court's gossips. Bernetta knocked her boots against the doorframe before stepping inside one evening, the scent of gun oil still clinging to her gloves. Iskander was at the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, translating a Turkish manuscript into Latin. "You're late," he said without looking up. "There was a skirmish near the border." "Not ours, but close enough to make the colonel nervous," she said, unfastening her belt. "They're shuffling assignments again. I might be moved south." He set the pen down. "How far?" "Near Trieste. Not more than a week's ride." She sat beside him, her eyes tired but steady. "It's not permanent. They just want eyes on the coast." He leaned back, watching her. "You won't be safe there." "I've never had that luxury." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you go if I asked you not to?" "I would ask you why you think I could afford not to." His silence settled heavily between them. The candle flickered. Outside, the city murmured beneath its gas lamps, unaware of the two people trying to hold a life together with threadbare hands. "When I was a boy," he said quietly, "my tutor used to tell me that loyalty was a blade it can cut both ways, depending on how you hold it. I never understood that until now." Bernetta's fingers found his, calloused and ink-stained. "I'm not loyal to their plans. I'm loyal to what we're building." He turned his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Then let me come with you." "You'd be useless at a garrison." "No," he said. But I could pose as a translator. Or even a courier. You know I speak enough languages to be useful. She studied him. You'd give up what little comfort you've carved out here to follow me into army camps in salt air? I gave up an empire. What's a few more nights without heat? The next morning, she spoke to a friend in the Signal Corps. By week's end, Iskander was assigned as an auxiliary interpreter, carrying forged Austro-Hungarian credentials and a satchel of letters he was never meant to read. The journey south was wet and slow. Railway lines had been damaged from seasonal flooding, so they rode partway in military wagons, the horses restless and the wheels sticky with river clay. Bernetta kept her uniform buttoned to the throat, her cap pulled low. They spoke little in public, never touching, never daring even a glance. But at night, in their tent, she would unbraid her hair while he read aloud from the battered novel he carried in his pack, a volume of Goethe she had dismissed as sentimental until she heard it in his voice. One night, as wind battered the canvas above them, she interrupted him. I never thought I'd be here. He looked up. In Trieste? In love. He closed the book. When did you know? In the stables. The way you stood like you belonged there, even though you didn't. You looked so sure. I wasn't, he said. I was terrified. She reached for him, her hand resting over his heart. You didn't show it. He kissed her then, slow and quiet, as if they had all the time in the world. But time was not theirs. Rumors reached the garrison of unrest further east. Tirana's throne had passed to Iskander's cousin, a man known for his alliances with foreign powers and his disdain for diplomacy. Austria watched with interest. The officers began whispering of realignment, of borders redrawn in ink and blood. One afternoon, Bernetta was summoned to the command tent. When she returned, her expression gave nothing away. They want me back in Vienna, she said. Temporary reassignment. Something to do with my father's health. Iskander didn't ask if she believed it. He only nodded. When do you leave? Tomorrow at dawn. He packed her satchel in silence. When he handed it to her, she touched his face with both hands. If I don't write, I'll wait anyway. I know, she said. That's what scares me. She rode out at first light, her silhouette swallowed by mist. Iskander remained behind, the sea salt thick in the air, the days long and restless. Then, 3 weeks later, a sealed envelope arrived in the courier pouch. His name was written in a familiar hand, but the seal was imperial. He opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of parchment and a summons. General Graham required his presence in Vienna. The only explanation, a signature beneath the imperial crest. Bernetta. The train lurched into Vienna beneath a bruised sky, sleet streaking the carriage windows like ink on parchment. Iskander stepped onto the platform in borrowed boots, his false papers folded neatly within his coat lining. He kept his head down, collar turned high. No guards stopped him. The summons had come without explanation, but the signature had been hers. He found the general's residence just past the Ringstrasse, a fortress of stone and symmetry. The brass knocker shaped like an eagle's head was cold in his hand. A footman opened the door, looked him over, and said nothing before stepping aside. The drawing room was silent save for the crackle of a low fire. General Graham stood with his back to the hearth, hands clasped behind him. His uniform bore the weathered creases of a man who lived more with maps than men. You've come alone. Iskander inclined his head. You asked for me. No, the general said. My daughter did. He motioned toward a chair, but Iskander remained standing. I knew what you were the moment I saw you at the palace, the general said. But I let her dance with you because I thought you'd leave like the rest of them. Instead, I had to explain to the emperor why his long-expected ally abdicated and disappeared into our ranks. I didn't come here to embarrass your family. No, the general said. But you did. The fire hissed softly. Neither man moved. She has a commission. She earned it. And she's been assigned to a post that will not accommodate scandal. Then let me marry her. Iskander's voice didn't rise, it only deepened, steady as a winter river. The general narrowed his eyes. You'd make her a fugitive to your own people. And here, you have no standing. No title. No land. Nothing to offer her but exile in a country that doesn't want you. I offered her choice. She chose me. She chose love. That's not the same as survival. A door opened down the hall. Boots on tile, then a pause. Let him speak for himself, Bernetta said as she stepped into the room. Her uniform was pressed. Her cap tucked under one arm. The last time Iskander had seen her, she had ridden into fog. Now, she stood before him like a verdict. I asked him to come, she said. Because I want a life that answers to me. Not to your fears. Not to the Empire's expectations. The general turned toward her, his voice lower now. Do you know what you're risking? I've weighed it. Every day. He looked between them, the silence stretching until it snapped. You'll have no protection from me, he said. You walk into this together, you face the consequences together. Bernetta nodded. We always have. The general left without another word. The firelight caught the edge of her cheek as she turned to Iskander. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd be here. She moved closer, not touching, not yet. They've offered me a post in Prague. Civil logistics. Uniform stays on, but it's far from the front. Would they accept a civilian clerk with no official history? They might. Especially if he speaks 6 languages. He let out a slow breath. Then let's go. She reached into her coat and drew out the chain she had worn hidden for months. The ring still hung from it, dulled by time but untouched. He took it from her hand and slid it onto her finger. You once told me promises weren't enough, she said. He lifted her hand, kissed the inside of her wrist. Then let this be a beginning. They left Vienna before dawn, traveling by third-class rail under assumed names. No trumpets, no courtiers. Only the quiet hum of a future they would build without permission. In Prague, they found a room above a tailor's shop, where the windows faced the river and the bells of St. Vitus echoed at dusk. She wore plain clothes when off duty. He began teaching languages at a school for civil clerks. They never asked the world to approve. They only asked for time. And in time, they carved out a life slowly, carefully, like a song built from silence. The first winter in Prague settled in with a quiet that felt unfamiliar. Snow gathered along the iron balconies, softened the sharp corners of alleyways, and dulled the clatter of carts in the street below. In their apartment above the tailor's shop, the coal stove hissed gently through the evenings, and the windows fogged with breath and heat. Bernetta often returned late from the administrative offices on Postovska Street, her uniform dusted with soot from the trams that groaned through the city's hills. On one such night, she stepped inside with her gloves damp from melted snow and her eyes alert in a way Iskander hadn't seen since Trieste. There's a man asking questions, she said as she unbuttoned her coat. He's not military. Not local either. Hungarian, maybe. He looked up from the letters he was sorting. A name? He didn't give one. Asked the quartermaster if any new clerks had arrived from Vienna recently. Said he was following up on a missing interpreter. Iskander folded the letter in his hand, slow and deliberate. Someone from the southern garrison? He wore civilian boots but carried himself like someone trained. Not a wanderer. He nodded once, then reached for the drawer beneath the table where they kept their papers. We'll have to shift our route to the school. No more through the square. He paused. And we'll start burning anything with Tirana's seal. Bernetta leaned against the doorframe, watching him. You knew this might happen. I knew peace wouldn't mean quiet. She crossed the room and lifted his chin with 2 fingers, her expression unreadable. I won't lose you to politics I can't see coming. You won't, he said. But we may have to go further inland. There's a village east of Brno where no one would think to look for a former prince and a general's daughter. She considered that. I'll need to resign from my post. Quietly. We'll leave before the next full moon. The following week passed in careful preparation. Bernetta visited her commanding officer and requested a leave of absence under the pretense of illness in the family. Her tone was measured, her reasoning unassailable. Meanwhile, Iskander visited a former student whose family owned a grain mill near the Svatava River. In exchange for tutoring their youngest son in Latin and German, they offered a room above the mill and a promise of discretion. On their last morning in Prague, Bernetta stood in their modest kitchen watching the snow fall sideways. She wore a long wool coat not issued by the army, and her hair was braided beneath a hat she had bought from a Moravian widow 2 streets over. She held a cloth bundle in one hand, letters, a small silver brooch, and the passport with her false name stitched into the lining. You're quiet, Iskander said, fastening the straps of their travel bag. I'm listening, she replied. To what? To the sound of a chapter ending. They boarded the early train east without incident. The carriage smelled faintly of tobacco and damp wool. An older couple shared the compartment with them, speaking in low Czech, their voices rising only when the train passed through tunnels and the windows shuttered in their frames. Iskander kept his gaze on the passing snow-covered fields, while Bernetta traced patterns in the condensation on the glass. 3 hours later, they stepped onto a platform built of timber and iron, the countryside quiet beneath a low, pale sky. A man with a cap too large for his head greeted them with a nod and led them to the mill. Their new room had a sloped ceiling and a narrow window that overlooked a frozen stream. It was enough. That evening, she stood beside the stove, stirring a pot of barley and cabbage, her sleeves rolled to the elbow. He watched her from the table, his hands still dusted with flour from chopping wood. You had the chance to go back once, she said without turning. To reclaim what was yours. I had the chance to be half of something hollow, he said. I chose to be whole with you. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes soft but sharp. Sometimes I wonder if you miss it. The weight of it all. I miss my mother's garden, he said. And the smell of the sea. But not the silence of being watched. Not the rooms where no one could speak freely. She ladled the stew into 2 bowls and handed him one. Then we'll plant a garden in the spring. He smiled, not with triumph, but with something quieter. And find salt to scatter on the windowsill so you'll feel safe. They ate in silence, the kind that comes only after storms have passed and the air feels clean. Outside, the wind pressed against the window panes, but inside the mill, time slowed. No titles, no uniforms, no borders. Just 2 people who had outrun expectation and found, at last, a place where neither had to hide.